Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. Welcome back to the Brian Escow Show. I was not expecting to do another solo episode this morning, so I'm just going to do some on the fly talking about the woke right because it's so relevant to the discourse right now. I mean, if you're on Twitter at least, which so many people are these days, I certainly am. That's where a lot of the conversation is starting. And there's this battle going on between the woke right and MAGA and the Charlie Kirk faction and the Nick Fuentes faction and the Groypers. And what does it all mean? What's it all about? So I happen to have some insights into that. So I'll go ahead and talk about it, even though I've talked about it a lot recently. So you'll forgive me if you're actually a regular listener of mine and I keep hitting this same topic over and over. Um, Sorry about that. But I think this message needs to be said. And so, at the risk of trying to reach more people, I think I'll take the risk of annoying some of my faithful listeners. So, but I wasn't expecting to do this today because I had an interview scheduled. But this is my problem. I took too long to get the link out. Yes, it was on our calendar, and I won't say who it was. It's a person running for Congress. They seem like an excellent person, great candidate. I'm extremely excited to interview them, and I'm holding out hope that I will one day, but I'll take the heat. You know, this is what happens when I don't treat the podcast like a job. It was on the books, but I probably should have got that link out earlier. And what are you going to do? So we're going to audible. All right. For any football fans out there, I love football. We're audibling. All right. Vivek, I remember, I wonder if it was about a year ago. Vivek had some conversation with Ann Coulter, and you could start to see the fault lines, the cracks between MAGA and the woke right. And look, first we got to define what the woke left is. Okay. And the woke left is basically the people who believe in critical race theory. What does this all mean? If you're woke left, if you subscribe to the critical race theory view of things, the way you look at American society is that it's slanted towards straight white people, that straight white people still today have a built-in advantage just because of the structure of our society. Yes, we had the Civil Rights Act. Yes, we've had progress, but still there's this fundamental structural unfairness. It's like putting a square peg in a round hole, right? This critical race theorist says mainstream American culture is a white culture, and therefore it imposes burdens and hardships spiritually, economically, philosophically, culturally on non white people. And therefore, because that's fundamentally unfair and at no fault of the victims at all, society needs to be restructured. And so we need to deconstruct and reconstruct into something more racially equitable. And you could see how you can slip in very easily some sort of Marxist themes there. You go not only racially equitable, but economically equitable. And you could just see how it all ties in. And I've said ad nauseum how I studied this stuff in law school, and I said, "Oh, damn! I guess I'm more of a Republican than a Democrat these days." Wow! And that was the whole basis of my political evolution. And so here I am now, trying to make sense of the remainder of my political identity. Um, how do I view issue by issue? But knowing that I'm coming from a place that loves America, that believes in it, that believes in our system, and that doesn't believe it needs to be torn down from scratch. You know, I always used to think of politics as like a metaphor for a building. Do you need to gut it? Do you need to tear it down completely and restart? Is it just a little paint job? What kind of reforms do you need? And I certainly don't think we need to knock the whole thing down. So you get a guy like Vivek who captured the essence of what it meant to reject that critical race theory narrative. That was a little convoluted way to say it, but he came out and said, remember, he's a former Democrat himself, but he had a similar epiphany about identity politics and the culture war stuff, and he became a Republican, right? And now you have Vivek Ramaswamy advocating for MAGA, right? It's like, wait a minute. I thought this was the mainstream media said this is supposed to be a white supremacist Christian nationalist movement. What's going on here? And you'll notice how fundamentally embraced Vivek was by Trump, by JD Vance, by everyone in in the MAGA movement. But he wasn't embraced by Ann Coulter. In fact, I think she said in that interview I was referencing earlier, "Hey man, I like you a lot. I agree with damn near. I'll admit I agree with everything you say, but I would never vote for you for president." She said because you're Indian, and you could see Vivek's face deflate a little bit, and that right there was the perfect encapsulation of the difference between MAGA and the woke right. And I think um, over the years, whether it's Trump's refusal to abandon America's support of Israel, whether it's his willingness to embrace Vivek Ramaswamy and this H-1B or HB1 visa controversy, this idea that Trump's saying, no, we need to, I mean, who's going to argue that Trump is not for cracking down on illegal immigration and getting our immigration system in order? But he didn't want to shut the door completely. Trump has said, we do need some high level immigration. I don't know the truth of the answer on that issue. You have interesting debates about that raging. For example, between Eric Weinstein and Vivek Ramaswamy. But I think Trump's earned the benefit of the doubt that, you know, he's looking out for America's best interest. But between the Israel support, between the immigration controversy, you have the woke right now, which I'll clarify what that term means in a minute, but I think you can see where I'm going with saying, hey, this isn't MAGA. And they're discovering, the Nick Fuentes, the Ann Coulters, that MAGA isn't what they thought it was. So we're all learning and growing and shifting, and the political dynamic is always evolving. So, whereas the woke left is the critical race theorist, meaning this society is slanted to whites and we need to reform it drastically. Um, MAGA is enough of the race bullshit. Not that we want to completely forget about the concepts of social equity and social justice and diversity. I mean, by any means, but drop the unnecessary narratives and the framing and the preaching and all of it, and just get back to race neutral norms where we work together. We have pride in the country and we have common sense policies. That's MAGA, which is a very understandable reaction to the woke left, and I think explains Trump's rise. And so, again, my eventual coming to the understanding that that's what MAGA is what enabled me to cross over and join the movement. Excuse me, another sip of tea. And then you have the woke right, which is also an understandable reaction to the woke left and critical race theory, but it's not okay. It's not appropriate. It's equally bad. You got to condemn it. And so you have these people who think that their country is being invaded and infiltrated. And, you can give them a bone and say, look, these narratives have been very damaging to white people, to traditional American culture. And you can understand where they're coming from. But I don't know. It's just maybe because I'm a former Democrat, I'm a liberal guy, I grew up, I have the experiences that I've had. You know, I think back to a clip of Nick Fuentes. I think it was with that guy Sneeko. I don't know how I came across this clip randomly. I think it was pretty recent. And they were going to a comedy show. And Sneeko says to Nick Fuentes, so have you ever been to a comedy show? And Nick said, no, this is my first time. And I thought to myself, and again, maybe I'm just being anecdotal and this isn't proof of anything, but I thought to myself, wow, I wonder if Nick, if he had more experiences in the world, if he wouldn't just be more open, not too open to where he gives up on what he believes in, but if he could drop the hate. And I don't know about Ann Coulter. I don't know about her experiences. So it certainly can't be explained by one person's particular upbringing. There is definitely a reactionary, angry, racially motivated fringe on the right, but they're realizing that they're not welcome in MAGA from Trump himself. So isn't that interesting? So what I'm trying to do at this point is obviously continue to educate myself on the issues and become, you know, a more interesting and capable um, advocate, but really just in a learning phase still. But the one thing I do know is that the woke left and the woke right are both very dangerous. And so until I get to a point where I can actually speak authoritatively on X, Y, or Z, I will just be the guide asking questions, learning from people, hosting people from diverse backgrounds. But I'm going to push back on the hateful stuff. I mean, I got a lot of anti-Semitic comments in the last couple of weeks. Um, you see Vivek getting crushed by it. It's pretty sickening, and I'm going to lend my voice because I think if we, I think if we overcome the extremes, then we can have a conversation and talk about real policy and what really matters, and we can solve the issues that are really important. It's pretty interesting. The woke right, as hateful as they are and angry as they are and racist and anti-Semitic, they do often bring up economic issues that you could imagine being discussed on the far left. They're concerned about American people. So I think we got to cool everything down by bringing people into conversations more so rather than excluding them. That doesn't mean you get to platform everybody. It doesn't mean you don't have social consequences if you say if you're reckless. It's funny being online as a young kid. I'm glad. Let me put it this way: I'm very fortunate that I wasn't doing videos in high school and college years. I would have made a fool out of myself many times over. So, like JD Vance says, you don't want to condemn someone for life for saying something stupid online once, twice, or even three times in their 20s, this and that. And I get that. And I'm with him on that. But, you also got to understand that actions have consequences. So it's people agree that this is a pretty tense time. And we've got this culture war raging. And, it's hard to imagine us actually erupting into any sort of hot civil war. But um, it's just sad that there's so much division. But it's a weird time with the technology and the information flow. I mean, and it's only accelerating, right? I mean, AI. It's really. I mean, to think what comes next when you can't tell what's real and what's not. My goodness. I mean, if you thought a constant access to information was hard enough to deal with and make sense of the facts and what the real reality is, when you have AI stuff now, and then you have all this stuff about aliens and UFOs, and I'm into it. Um, and I saw something pretty crazy, which doesn't prove that it was alien, but I saw a pretty unbelievable UFO earlier this year, and you have people in Congress talking about it like it's real. Like what the? So it's hard. It's hard to know what's real. It takes a lot of work for the. I mean, we're working guys, we're working people, and we're trying to make sense out of the news, and it's tough. There's a lot to consider. So I support people who are into common sense policies, who are into treating people with dignity and respect. That doesn't mean that you're not going to cause some pain in people's lives, especially if they're an illegal. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have to do some cold things along the way, and that sucks. Who wants to, you know, enforce and be cold about something? But at the end of the day, that's how you enforce laws and have a system. So I don't know. I guess that's all I got. I hope that was okay for an impromptu episode. I hope this helped you understand the basic layout of where the furniture is in this culture war that I have no interest in perpetuating. I'd like it to be over, but every time I turn around, it seems like it's rearing its ugly head. And now we're in the phase where Nick Fuentes is being um, not mainstreamed, but with Charlie's death, all of it put together, the HB1 controversy. It's like, no, there is something we have to deal with here. And so, like I said, I'll continue to lend my voice and to be part of the solution in any way I can. That means listening to the woke right, understanding that they do have some legitimate concerns, but also pushing back and saying, hey, guys. So I'd love to play a role in mediating. You know, Nick was on Dave Smith's podcast recently. And if you don't know, I did a podcast all about my opinion on Nick Fuentes a couple of weeks ago after listening to his appearance on Dave Smith and Patrick Bet David. And he said on Dave Smith, there was a point in the conversation where they said, there's got to be a give and take. And so if you want me to tone down my hateful rhetoric and my people to, tone down their hateful rhetoric, okay, but you got to give us something too. And so I'm here to say there does need to be a give and take on both sides. And hopefully that can happen, because if not, it's just going to get worse. And I don't know what that looks like. Again, I can't imagine there being a hot civil war, especially a racially, you know, race war. But we don't want it to get worse. We want it to get better so that we can focus on what really matters. Policy that would actually impact people's lives. The good stuff, the honest fights, what it's all about. That's all I'm interested in. Right. So thank you all for listening. I've got next week the author of a book called Dethroning Davos by Teddy Pierce. I've started it. It's really good so far. So I think it's about globalism. I think it's going to be about the financial institutions and who controls society and that kind of perspective, kind of libertarian, conservative. So we'll see what that's all about. And it should be a great conversation. So that is the next guest episode. So thank you all for listening. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Later.